This is Words of Radiance with Dr. Troy Munson.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Troy Munson. Fear of the unknown. This is something that came up in my mind when I was doing a new technique that I'm going to talk about today that I found completely fascinating. So there is this spine surgeon up in Seattle, and he wrote a book. He's got a couple books out now, but he wrote a book called Back in Control, and his name is David Hanscom. So he's in my neck of the woods, and one of my clients handed it to me. He says, this is a lot what you do. This is kind of like right up your alley. And I thought, all right, well, I'll take a read. And the book opens with one of the most amazing testimonials I think I've ever heard. This guy had been traveling throughout the world. He'd been doing all kinds of stuff, lifting, everything, but he comes back to the States and he's riding a horse. And during riding the horse, for some unknown reason, the horse threw him really just literally into a tree where he broke all the ribs on one side of his body and two of his vertebrae. So in the lumbar spine, the low back, there are 5 vertebrae, L1 through L5. And he broke L1 and 2. And he's in excruciating pain laying there. And his buddy that was with him, he's like, I'm going to have to go for help. You're going to have to stay here. I just don't know how long it's going to take me. So he's riding back. They finally come back like some 6-8 hours later. And he waits with him all night long. In the morning, some big dudes finally come up the trail and they literally put him into a bag and carry him out. And he'd been laying there most of the night, kind of freezing to death in the mountains. And they drag him back. He learns about all the ribs that are broken, and he has surgery on his low back, and he's in a ton of pain for 6 weeks, rehabbing, trying to get better, and finally the pain level goes down to about a 4. But within 6 months after that, or some period of time, he now is up into the 6, 7s, and 8s pain again. So they go in and they fuse now not L1 and 2, which they already fused, but now they fuse 3. And his pain is mildly better, but he's still in a ton of pain. And within a year, he's got L4 fused too. So now 4 of his lumbar spine are fused. And this is back in the 90s. And he goes from being this vibrant individual to just in chronic, unbelievable pain. And for 6 years, he's completely miserable. I mean, his pain is literally like 8 to 10 almost all the time. He is at his wit's end. He cannot even scarcely believe his life. If you could imagine being in 6 years of hell, this would be it. And he ends up going to this doctor, this surgeon, and he says, hey, I think I can help you. I can open you basically up from your skull to your butt. And I'm going to re-break your lumbar vertebra that they fused and put them into a better position. We're going to put a rod in your back so at least the curvature's there, because I think it's partly the curve that's not there because they didn't fuse your back well. And this was his idea. And of course, he's mortified. He's terrified. He doesn't want to do the surgery. He knows. He's already been through surgeries. He knows what's coming. And he just doesn't feel at peace with it. And so he somehow happens upon David Hanscom in Seattle, and he goes there, and he describes it as, I walk in, I barely got 2 words out, and he comes out and he says, there's nothing structurally wrong with your back. You don't need surgery. Now, while you would think that would be elating, he's yet still got 8s to 10 pain. So though he is happy in one respect, but he was totally devastated in another, because he's like, if there's nothing structurally wrong with my back, then why do I feel like this? And David began to tell him that what he has his clients do when he sees a condition like this is he has them go and begin to write each night for 30 minutes all their thoughts, emotions, and feelings about their situation, about their life, about everything and anything that they want to write about. And I'm going to skip ahead in the book a little bit because he talks about every time he would meet with a new client, he'd say, okay, your pre-op appointment is X weeks away, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is. But from now until that time, you are going to start writing for 30 minutes every night. And you're going to write about your thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything that you think about your pain, about your life, about everything, anything. Nothing's out of bounds here, but it's wise to write about the experience that you're having right now with your pain. At the end of that 30 minutes, you're not allowed to continue writing. You rip up that piece of paper into tiny little bits. Now, he does that because he explains that when we're in pain, we recruit a very specific center of the brain, and that is the pain center of that particular part of our body. Now, over time, because we're reporting pain so frequently and it wasn't done before, it has to recruit other centers of the brain to actually make the pain stronger. And so now it's recruiting 4 areas, 5 areas, 8 areas, 10 areas, all these different areas of the brain to try to help transmit this pain message. And so the body actually gets good at transmitting the pain until all of a sudden it doesn't actually have the real pain anymore at the site that originally had pain. It now is just performing that mechanism because that's what it's been doing for so long. And a lot of it is tied to our emotional state. And so when we begin to write, it begins to do something. Now, this gentleman, Mark, that I talked about in this story, where he flew off the horse, broke ribs, broke low back, tons of surgeries, when he told him this, he said, "You're going to go home and you're going to write for 30 minutes tonight. And you're going to be at my seminar in 3 weeks where I teach these methods." And so he began writing that night. And then he talks about it. He goes, "The next morning, I was bracing myself because I was waiting for the stabbing, piercing low back pain to come. It didn't come." And he's like, "Then I wanted to stretch, and now I knew I was in trouble because stretching was always, always stabbing pain. And so he started to stretch, and the stabbing pain didn't come. And so he stretched. He's like, well, that's weird. That's different." Then he got up, and he's still sore, but no 8s, 9s, 10s like he's had every morning for who knows how many months. And he's bracing himself each step walking to the bathroom. And he makes it to the bathroom. And the next night, he writes again. And within 2 or 3 days, he's sitting on a beach, or rather laying on a beach with his head on a log. And he's laying there with one of his good friends, and he is marveling that it actually is possible that he's out of pain laying here. He has none. And he's totally amazed at what's happened. And now, of course, if you're in that same position, you're like, how in the world did this work? How did I go from tremendous pain to doing some dumb thing like writing about my stupid feelings? All of a sudden, I have no pain. And so he goes through the aspect of talking about the different dynamics of how the brain works and how this chronic pain works. So the statistic that he gave, when he has patients that come in and he says, "You will write 30 minutes. He says, by the time we get to the pre-op appointment, more than 50% of my clients have either canceled their surgery or they're canceling it at time because they have no pain or they have so little that it doesn't matter to them." That's how powerful the brain is. Now we get a look into this window of why 70 to 80% of surgeries fail, meaning spinal surgeries. They fail so often because a lot of times there isn't actually structurally something wrong. Now you may be asking, let's say you have a failed low back surgery and now you're kind of pissed out there because you're listening to this. Well, people kind of demand that doctors do something. You're desperate. And the doctor's like, well, I guess I could go in there and clean up some things. And I've read reports of doctors that go in that say a lot of times when I go into a surgery, I don't find the stuff that I think I'm going to find. And now I'm like, what am I going to do? Here I am inside somebody. I've got to do something. I can't just close them back up and say the surgery was unnecessary. That makes me look stupid. But that's often the case of what's going on. So for you out there with chronic pain, now this may be something incredibly viable. And we're going to hope that you're one of those 50, 60%ers that this just kind of works like a charm. And so, but it begins to put power back in your own hands. So how do I deal with this chronic pain? Now, for those of you out there, maybe you've got on this and you've got chronic pain, but maybe you've got a friend that's got diabetes that's eating phenomenally well, and yet their sugars are still a wreck. Could this also work for them? Why not? Maybe you're out there and you got high blood pressure. Could this also perhaps work for you? It could. Now, I'm not one to have a lot of pain. I take pretty good care of myself and my mind is pretty clear. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to start having clients do this. But I had a client that's been in chronic low back pain for decades. And they told me, because I texted them, so the next morning I'm like, how was the writing? And they said this: I didn't do it. And I was like, what? I said, why did you not do it? She goes, I can't believe the resistance in my own head. And I thought, fascinating. So that night I vowed to write. This was a week and a half ago. And I was at my desk at home and I didn't write. I found the same resistance in my own head. And I thought, that's fascinating. Now I didn't combat it. I just wanted to watch it. And so then all of a sudden the next night I said, tonight I will write no matter what. And I did. And by the third night, that's when the title of this particular podcast came to me. Because I was writing about other things, not just some things that I'd experienced, but I was branching into other ideas and other objectives. Just writing all thoughts that came to mind. And this thought of the fear of the unknown came to me because I wanted to know why there was resistance in writing something so simple, something inexpensive, doesn't cost any money, just 30 minutes of your time. And I found this thought to be fascinating, fear of the unknown, that I didn't know what would happen to me when I started writing. I literally was a bit apprehensive, but now I rather enjoy doing it. And it's something I think we should all get to the point of writing. And now when I write, I don't write for the full 30 minutes often. I will write until all of a sudden I notice a shift or change within me. If you're sensitive enough to get it, then do that. But in the beginning, I still recommend that you push through and write for 30 minutes for a while. And just put the time in about your thoughts and experiences and feelings and all kinds of things, whatever is associated with what you're going through. It could be a personal thing, could be about finances, could be pain in the body, could be a disease process in the body, could be cancer, could be anything. I recommend that you go through the process and do that while you're on any kind of treatment. It would be a wise move for all of us. Pain, dysfunction, great life, bad life, doesn't matter. We should all be doing a little bit of writing. And I think we would find it very helpful. But I'm going to share one last thing from the book. This was really telling. Now, if we really believed that the problem was coming from somewhere in the body and it wasn't the mind, then if the greatest tell would be, what if we removed the part that was actually where the pain was? So what I'm talking about is he talks about amputees. So you'll have these amputees that have these arms and legs that are just completely withered and gone. They're just non-functional, but they're in a lot of pain. And it's some 60% of the time that when they remove the arm, the pain remains. And 40% of the time, it's actually worse or different worse than when they had the extremity. So think about that. If you're like, hey, I've got arm pain. Hey, my back hurts. Could you just cut my back out? I'm telling you, it's not going to do as well as you think because they've already tried to do it with amputees and it doesn't take the pain away a vast majority of the time. And in fact, most of them have more pain after they've had the supposed site of pain removed. I mean, what's more substantial than having a limb cut off? So with that in mind, if you're out there, I highly recommend that you pick up the book Back in Control. It's a fascinating read. And just to even read Mark's story, the first 9 pages will blow you away. It is just incredible. And the research that he cites and the like the amputees, and he even tells another story about 3 workers that had a saw that had a short in it, and they were slowly being electrocuted, and by the end of the day, none of them could use the saw the entire day because the stimulation that they felt in the very beginning became so intense because the brain was recruiting other centers of the brain to make that pain more magnified that they literally wouldn't even touch the saw. So the next day when they took it apart, they found out that lo and behold, it had a frayed wire, and as soon as they fixed it, the saw was fine. So, I mean, he cites a lot of cool stuff in the book, and it's really a fascinating read, even just for a layperson. I enjoyed it significantly as a doctor, but I mean, it just is profound in and of itself. So again, I hope this helps. I hope this kind of even lets you into maybe some blocks within your own mind, the fear of the unknown, of going somewhere. Perhaps maybe your pain has become your ever-present friend, and to let go of it seems crazy, but it's almost like you don't want to let it go. I will encourage you to push beyond those things and go ahead and do that writing and tearing up that piece of paper. I will say this, every time I tore up those pieces of paper that I wrote for 30 minutes, the biggest smile was on my face. It is really an interesting, fascinating thing to do. So I hope you do it. I hope it hits you right and you tell other people and get them out of pain and really appreciate the power of the human mind and the ability to clear ourselves. And so until next time, I'm Dr. Troy Munson.
Thank you for listening to Dr. Munson's Words of Radiance. We hope you enjoyed our show.
The information on Dr. Troy Munson's podcast is meant to educate the listener and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease.